Daniel's hands wouldn't stop shaking. He stood in the center of a circular courtroom carved from black crystal, surrounded by faces that wanted him dead. The Galactic Council sat on elevated platforms that spiraled upward like the inside of a giant shell. Hundreds of alien species watched him from those platforms, their eyes reflecting the blue light that pulsed through the walls. The boy was 14 years old. He wore the gray jumpsuit they had given him after the arrest. His brown hair was still dirty from the mine collapse 3 weeks ago. He could still smell the sulfur and rock dust when he closed his eyes. He could still hear the screaming. Chief Magistrate Quellen rose from the highest platform. The creature looked like a mantis made of silver metal, with 6 arms that moved independently of each other. Its voice came from a translator device that made every word sound cold and final. Daniel Chen of Earth Colony 7, you stand accused of sabotage resulting in 17 deaths. The evidence is clear. You disabled safety systems in Tunnel 42. You caused the collapse. How do you answer? Daniel's throat was dry. He had told this story a dozen times already. Nobody believed him. I didn't disable anything, he said. His voice cracked. I tried to warn them. The tunnel readings were wrong. The rock was unstable. I saw the cracks forming and I ran to pull the alarm, but you were found at the control panel, Quellen interrupted. Your genetic markers were on the safety override switch. 17 workers died because you wanted to prove human superiority over proper mining protocols. That's not what happened, Daniel shouted. The guards moved closer, their weapons humming. I was trying to activate the emergency evacuation, not shut it down. The system was already offline when I got there. Someone else. Silence. Quellen's voice cut through the room like a blade. Humans are a dangerous addition to our civilization. You come from a death world where everything tries to kill you. You are violent, impulsive, and you do not respect authority. This incident proves what many of us have long suspected. Humanity cannot be trusted with our technology or our lives. Daniel looked up at the gallery where his parents sat behind a force field. His mother was crying. His father pressed his hand against the barrier, mouthing words Daniel couldn't hear. 2 guards held them in their seats. A reptilian counselor named Sareth spoke next. Her scales were deep green and her eyes were yellow with vertical slits. The boy is young. Perhaps a labor sentence would be more appropriate than... No. Quellen's voice was absolute. This crime demands the harshest response. We will send a message to all humans that such behavior will not be tolerated in civilized space. The magistrate's compound eyes fixed on Daniel. I sentence you to the crucible. The courtroom erupted. Even the aliens who hated humans seemed shocked. Daniel heard gasps and angry chittering from a dozen different species. His father was screaming something, fighting against the guards. Daniel didn't know what the crucible was, but he understood it was bad. Very bad. A small insectoid counselor with blue shell plates stood up. Magistrate, the crucible is reserved for war criminals and existential threats. This is a child who killed 17 beings, Quellen said. The sentence stands. Remove him. Guards grabbed Daniel's arms. They were tall creatures covered in chitinous armor, with too many joints in their limbs. They dragged him toward a side door while he struggled and yelled. I didn't do it. Please. Someone sabotaged the systems before I got there. Check the timestamps, please. Nobody listened. The door sealed behind him with a hiss that sounded final. They took him down a long corridor that seemed to descend forever. The walls changed from crystal to metal to something that looked like living tissue. Daniel's mind raced. He had grown. Up on Colony 7, a frontier mining settlement on the edge of human space. His father had taught him to read rock formations, to find water, to survive in tunnels when the power failed. His mother had taught him about honor and standing up for what was right. Neither of them had taught him what to do when the entire galaxy decided you were guilty. The corridor ended at a round chamber with a portal in the center. It looked like a vertical pool of mercury, rippling and reflecting fractured light. Strange symbols glowed around its edges. An old maintenance worker stood near a console, monitoring the portal. He was human, one of the few Daniel had seen since his arrest. The alien guards didn't seem to notice him or care what he did. As they pushed Daniel toward the portal, the old man looked at him. His eyes were sad but clear. He leaned close and whispered fast, "The dragons aren't what they tell you. Remember that. The dragons aren't monsters. They're prisoners like you." "What?" Daniel tried to turn back, but the guards shoved him forward. "The truth is in there," the old man said. "Find it." Daniel's feet touched the mercury surface. It felt like falling through ice. The courtroom vanished. The guards vanished. Everything vanished into a rushing darkness that pulled him down and down and down. He fell for so long he lost track of time. His stomach lurched. His ears popped. He couldn't breathe, couldn't scream, couldn't think. Then he hit the ground. The impact drove the air from his lungs. He lay on scorched stone that was still warm, like a griddle that had just been turned off. The air smelled like smoke and copper. It was thin and cold, and every breath burned. Daniel rolled onto his side, gasping. Slowly his eyes adjusted to the dim light. He was on a flat expanse of black rock. Above him, there was no sky. Instead, a swirling void of purple and red energy churned like a storm frozen in place. Floating islands drifted in that void, connected by massive chains that glowed with dying light. In the distance, something roared. It echoed across the emptiness, deep and rumbling and unmistakably alive. Daniel saw firelight on one of the distant islands. Shadows moved against that light, huge shadows with wings. The rock beneath Daniel's feet vibrated with each distant roar. He stood up slowly, testing his legs. Nothing was broken, though his ribs ached from the landing. He looked around, trying to make sense of where he was. The prison dimension called the Crucible was nothing like he had imagined. Floating islands hung in the void at different heights, some small as houses and others large as city blocks. Thick chains connected them in a web that stretched into the purple darkness. The chains looked ancient, covered in markings that might have been writing or warnings or both. Daniel was alone on a small island, maybe 50 meters across. The ground was covered in ash and scattered with broken stone pillars that suggested ruins. He walked to the edge and looked down. There was no bottom, just the churning void that made his head spin if he stared too long. He needed water. He needed shelter. He needed to understand what the old maintenance worker had meant about dragons not being monsters. A narrow chain bridge connected his island to a larger one nearby. The chains were as thick as his torso and wrapped in some kind of corroded metal. Daniel tested his weight on the first link. It held firm. He started crossing, keeping low and moving carefully. The chain swayed with each step, but it seemed stable. The larger island had caves. Daniel found one that went back deep enough to hide from whatever was making those roaring sounds. Inside, his eyes adjusted to near darkness. Bioluminescent fungi grew on the walls in patches of blue and green, giving off just enough light to see by. Water dripped from the ceiling in one corner, forming a small pool. Daniel cupped his hands and drank. It tasted like minerals but seemed clean. Near the pool, more fungi grew in thick clusters. He recognized them from survival training on Colony 7. Edible, not tasty, but they would keep him alive. He spent hours exploring the cave system, finding a network of tunnels that connected different islands through the rock itself. Someone had carved these passages a long time ago. The walls had murals worn smooth by time, showing creatures with wings and fire. Dragons, he realized. This place had been their home once. Daniel emerged from a different tunnel exit on the third island he had explored. The air here was warmer. In the distance, he could see the source of the firelight. A massive island easily a kilometer across with structures that still stood intact. Spires of black stone reached upward. Flames burned in huge braziers that lined what looked like streets or gathering spaces, and between the spires he saw them. Dragons. They were enormous, each one the size of a small aircraft. Their scales reflected the firelight in colors ranging from deep red to midnight blue to burnished gold. Wings folded against their sides like massive sails. They moved with purpose, walking on four legs or flying short distances between the structures. Daniel counted at least 30 of them, maybe more hidden in the shadows. He watched from behind a broken wall, barely breathing. The dragons were not rampaging or fighting. They were organized. Some tended the fires. Others gathered in groups that looked like they were talking or planning. A few younger ones, smaller but still huge by human standards, practiced flying in a clear space between buildings. This was not a prison full of mindless beasts. This was a society that had been locked away and forgotten. A sound behind him made Daniel spin around. A dragon landed on the rock shelf above his hiding spot. This one was smaller than the others, maybe only the size of a truck. Its scales were deep blue with silver highlights. Yellow eyes fixed on him with predator intensity. Daniel froze. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he had nowhere to go. The dragon could cross the distance between them in a heartbeat. The dragon's head lowered, studying him. Smoke curled from its nostrils. Its mouth opened slightly, showing teeth longer than Daniel's forearm. "You are human," the dragon said. Its voice was female, coming from its throat in a deep resonance that Daniel could feel in his chest. The words were clear, translated by some technology he couldn't see. Daniel's voice came out as a whisper. Yes, why did they send a child here? The question surprised him. He expected threats or immediate violence, not curiosity. Daniel slowly raised his hands, showing they were empty. "They think I killed people," he said. "I didn't, but they didn't believe me." The dragon tilted its head, a gesture that reminded Daniel of a bird studying an insect. "Humans lie constantly. Why should I believe you?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted, "but I'm not going to run or fight. I can't do either against you, so I'm just going to tell the truth and hope it matters." The dragon's eyes narrowed. Then she turned her head and released a call that echoed across the islands. It was musical and complex, carrying information Daniel couldn't understand. Within minutes, other dragons began arriving. They landed on surrounding rocks or flew overhead, circling. Daniel counted 15, then 20, then stopped counting. They completely surrounded him. A massive dragon landed directly in front of Daniel with an impact that cracked the stone. This one was ancient, covered in scars and burns that spoke of battles long past. Its scales were dark red, fading to gray at the edges. One eye was clouded and blind, but the other eye held intelligence that made Daniel feel very small. "I am Elder Pyrith," the dragon rumbled. "I lead what remains of our people. The young one who found you is Ashir. She says you did not run from her. She says you spoke truth without fear. These things are unusual." Daniel's heart hammered in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "My father taught me that understanding comes before judgment. I don't know anything about dragons except what they tell us. They say you're monsters, but monsters don't have society. They don't have names. They don't ask questions before attacking." Pyrith's good eye studied Daniel for a long moment. The other dragons waited in silence. Finally, the elder spoke. "You are either very brave or very foolish. Perhaps both. The council sends no one here by accident. If you are here, they want you erased from existence." Pyrith's tail swished, sending up sparks from the stone. "But you interest me, small human. We shall test whether your words match your character. You will undergo the trial of understanding. 3 days in the deep caves where reality breaks. If you survive, we will hear your full story. If you do not, you will be forgotten like all who came before." 2 dragons grabbed Daniel, their claws surprisingly gentle. They lifted him into the air and flew toward a dark chasm at the center of the main island. Daniel looked back and saw Ashir watching him, her expression unreadable. Then they dropped him into the darkness. Daniel fell through absolute darkness for the second time that day. This time he was ready when he hit the bottom, rolling with the impact like his father had taught him. He landed in water shallow and ice-cold. The splash echoed in a space that sounded vast and empty. He stood up, dripping and shivering. His eyes searched for any light source and found none. The darkness here was complete, the kind that pressed against your eyeballs and made you wonder if you had gone blind. Then reality shifted. The darkness flickered, and suddenly Daniel was standing in bright sunlight. He was on a different world, under a sky that was orange instead of blue. Massive crystal towers stretched toward the clouds. Flying ships moved between the towers, sleek and beautiful. Dragons flew alongside the ships, working together with other species Daniel recognized from the council. Everyone seemed peaceful. "This cannot stand," a voice said. Daniel spun around. Quellen stood there, except this version was younger and wore different insignia. The magistrate was in a room with other council members, looking at a holographic display. "The dragons discovered our energy harvesting operations on the border worlds," another counselor said. This one was covered in thick fur and walked on 4 legs. "They are calling for our arrests. They say we are murdering entire populations." "They are not murders," Quellen replied coldly. They are necessary sacrifices for the Empire's survival. We need that energy. The dragons are too sentimental to make hard choices. They have proof. They have recordings of the nullifier draining Colony 19, all 3 billion inhabitants. Then we cannot let them present that proof. Quellen's mandibles clicked together. Prepare the fleet. We attack their homeworld at dawn. When this is over, we will be heroes who stopped a dragon uprising. History is written by winners. The vision dissolved. Daniel stood in darkness again, gasping. That couldn't be real. That had to be some kind of trick. The darkness flickered again. Now he saw battle. Dragons and council ships fighting in space above a burning world. Plasma fire and missiles lit up the void. A dragon broke apart under concentrated fire, its pieces spinning away into space. More dragons fell. They were outnumbered 10-1. Surrender, a council voice demanded over communications. You have lost. We will not surrender truth, a dragon voice replied. It sounded like Pyrath, but younger and stronger. We will not let you erase what you have done. Then you will be erased instead. The scene changed. Dragons in chains, thousands of them being marched through a portal. The same kind of portal Daniel had been pushed through. Behind them, their cities burned. Eggs were crushed. Younglings were torn from their parents. The council soldiers showed no mercy. The dragons attempted to overthrow the galactic order. A news broadcast declared. They sought to enslave all other species. They are monsters who nearly destroyed civilization. We have contained them in a special prison where they can harm no one. Let this be a lesson. The council protects all law-abiding citizens. Dissent will not be tolerated. Daniel fell to his knees. The water soaked through his jumpsuit. These were not random visions. These were memories, somehow preserved in this place where reality was thin. These were echoes of what actually happened. The dragons were not the monsters. The council was. Focus, he whispered to himself. His father's voice echoed in his mind from a time when they had been trapped in a collapsed tunnel together. When everything is falling apart, find something solid. Build from there. Daniel reached out and touched the stone floor. It was real. Cold and rough and undeniably there. He focused on that sensation, using it as an anchor while visions swirled around him. He stood up and started walking, keeping one hand on the wall. The visions came faster now. He saw the nullifier being built in secret, a massive device that could drain the life energy from entire solar systems. He saw the council using that stolen energy to power their empire, while blaming famines and disasters on natural causes. He saw his own mining colony. He saw council agents tampering with the tunnel systems, deliberately weakening supports. He saw them disable the safety systems right before Daniel arrived for his shift. They had set him up perfectly. A human child to take the blame while they stole energy from the planet's core. You were convenient, a vision of Quellen said. Humans are not trusted yet. Your guilt would warn others not to question authority. The energy we took from your colony will power the capital world for a year. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. They had murdered 17 people. They had framed him. They had destroyed his family. All for power. The vision stopped. Daniel stood in a chamber lit by a faint purple glow. Crystal formations grew from the floor and ceiling, meeting in the middle. They pulsed with light that seemed to breathe. These were memory crystals, the kind he had read about in history lessons. They stored information perfectly for thousands of years. He approached the largest cluster and touched it carefully. Information flooded his mind, coordinates, access codes, proof of every crime the council had committed for 300 years. The dragons had gathered all of it, trying to present their case before they were imprisoned. They had hidden it here, hoping someone would eventually find it. A sound made Daniel turn. Asher stood at the entrance to the chamber, her scales reflecting the crystal light. You followed me, Daniel said. I was told not to, Asher admitted. But I wanted to see if you would survive. Most go mad in the deep caves. The broken reality tears their minds apart. But you walk like you have seen hell before and come out the other side. These crystals, Daniel said, they prove everything. The war, the nullifier, all of it. The council framed your people. We know, Asher said quietly. We have always known. But we are prisoners. Who would believe us? Who would listen to monsters? Daniel thought about his parents watching him be sentenced. He thought about the old maintenance worker who whispered warnings. He thought about the 17 people who died in his colony. I'll listen, he said, and I'll make others listen too. The council is still using the nullifier, aren't they? Ashir nodded slowly. Elder Pyreth has tracked the energy signatures. A major harvesting event is coming. Within weeks. They plan to drain 30 populated systems at once. Billions will die. They will blame it on a cosmic disaster. Daniel looked at the memory crystals, then at Ashir. An idea was forming. Crazy and desperate, and maybe their only chance. Can you get me to Elder Pyreth? I think I know how to stop them. But we need to work together. Ashir studied him for a long moment. Then she lowered her head in what looked like a bow. You have passed the trial of understanding, Daniel of Earth. Not by surviving the visions, but by accepting the truth they showed. Come, the Ember Court awaits. She spread her wings and Daniel climbed onto her back, holding tight to her scales. They flew up through the chasm, leaving the deep caves behind. Above them, the other dragons waited. The Ember Court was a circular plaza surrounded by tall spires. Braziers burned at regular intervals, casting dancing shadows on the ancient stone. Dragons filled the space, some perched on the spires above while others stood in rings around the center. Daniel counted at least 60, possibly more in the shadows. Elder Pyreth waited at the center, his massive form radiating authority. When Ashir landed and Daniel climbed down from her back, every dragon's eyes fixed on the human boy. You survived the trial, Pyreth said. His voice echoed across the plaza. More than survived. Ashir tells me you understood the truth in those memories. Speak, Daniel of Earth, tell us what you propose. Daniel's mouth was dry, but he forced himself to stand straight. He was 14 years old, facing creatures that could kill him with a thought. But they were listening. That mattered more than his fear. The council buried the truth because they knew no one would believe prisoners, Daniel said. His voice carried in the quiet. But what if the truth came from outside? What if we could send proof to people who aren't trapped here? A dragon with golden scales spoke up. We have tried. The crucible blocks all communications. It is a sealed dimension. That is why it is a perfect prison. Nothing is perfect, Daniel replied. I learned that in the mines. Every system has flaws if you know where to look. You said you can track nullifier energy signatures. That means you have sensors that can pierce the dimensional walls somehow. Pyreth's good eye brightened with interest. We maintained one piece of technology when they imprisoned us, a quantum communicator hidden and preserved. But it would take enormous power to break through the crucible's barriers. Power we do not have. You don't, Daniel agreed. But the prison does. It's draining your energy constantly, right? That's how it weakens you over time. That energy has to go somewhere. If we could reverse the flow even for a few seconds, redirect that power into your communicator. The dragons shifted and murmured. A massive warrior dragon with scarred purple scales stepped forward. His name was Guardian Scales, and his voice rumbled like distant thunder. The boy speaks of using our prison as a weapon against our jailers. I have spent 200 years dreaming of such justice. He looked at Daniel with fierce approval. But can it be done? Can a human child and broken dragons build what you describe? I don't know, Daniel admitted. But doing nothing means watching billions die. The council will activate the nullifier. They'll harvest those 30 systems. And they'll keep doing it forever because nobody knows the truth. Pyreth raised his head and released a long, mournful note. The other dragons fell silent. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of centuries. We have waited 300 years. We have lost hope more times than I can count. We watched our elders fade away. Our younglings grow up in chains, our history turned to myth. He looked at Daniel. But perhaps hope wears a human face today. Very well, we will try. Show us what you need. The next days blurred together. Daniel worked alongside dragons who had engineering knowledge from before their imprisonment. They gathered in a workshop space carved into the largest spire. The quantum communicator was a crystalline device the size of a small car, still functional despite centuries of storage. Daniel's mining colony training proved valuable in unexpected ways. He understood power flow and energy distribution from working with tunnel equipment. He could read diagrams and schematics even when the symbols were alien. Most importantly, he knew how to solve problems with limited resources. Ashir became his constant companion and translator. She helped him communicate complex concepts to dragons whose specialties were different from his own. Together they mapped the Crucible's energy-draining systems, finding the collector nodes that dotted various islands. These are old, Ashir said, examining one of the nodes. It looked like a metal flower with petals that pulsed slowly. They date back to when dragons first built this dimension as a fortress, before the council repurposed it as a prison. Can we access their controls? Daniel asked. If we can reach the central hub, it should be beneath the Ember Court itself. Guardian Scales led a team to excavate the hub while Daniel and Asher designed the relay system. They needed to connect the energy collectors to the quantum communicator through a network of cables and amplifiers. The dragons contributed materials salvaged from their ruined city. Younger dragons like Asher helped with delicate work, their claws more precise than human hands could be. Why do you help us? Asher asked one night while they worked alone. The others were resting. You are young. You have your whole life ahead. Even if we fail, you might survive in the crucible for years. Why risk everything for creatures you just met? Daniel was quiet for a moment, adjusting a connection. On my colony, there was an accident when I was 10. A tunnel collapsed with 5 people inside. Everyone said they were dead. No point risking more lives trying to save them. My father went in anyway. He spent 18 hours digging them out. All 5 survived. Your father sounds brave. He is. But that's not the point. Afterward, I asked him why he did it. He said that doing the right thing isn't about odds or safety. It's about who you are when everything is falling apart. Daniel looked up at Asher. The council is falling apart. They're so focused on holding power that they've become the monsters they accused your people of being. I can't fix that by myself. But I can try, and trying matters. Asher was silent for a long moment. Then she touched her wingtip to Daniel's shoulder, a gesture of respect among dragons. You are wise beyond your years, small human. I think your father taught you well. On the 5th day, they were ready. The relay system was complete, a web of connections running from the energy collectors to the central hub, and then to the quantum communicator. It was crude and jury-rigged, held together with salvaged parts and hope, but Daniel had checked the math 3 times. It should work. For 5 seconds, they could punch through the dimensional barrier and send a transmission. The Ember Court gathered again. This time the mood was different. There was tension, yes, but also something they had not felt in centuries. Possibility. We have one chance, Elder Pyrath announced. One message to reach beyond these walls. It must count. It must go to someone who will act on what they learn. Daniel thought about that. Who in the Empire would believe such an impossible message? Who would risk everything to investigate? Then he remembered. The old maintenance worker. The human who had whispered warnings before Daniel was thrown into the crucible. Someone who already suspected the truth might be willing to hear more. I know someone, Daniel said. His name is Rogan. He's just a maintenance worker, but he told me to find the truth. That means he knows something is wrong. If we can reach him, if we can send him the proof from those memory crystals. Then we need to compress centuries of evidence into a 5-second burst, Asher said. Is that even possible? The memory crystals store information at quantum density, an elder dragon scholar named Wisdom Keeper said. If we can interface them with the communicator, we can send everything. But the compression will be intense. It may damage the crystals. Do it, Pyrath ordered. They worked through the night connecting the memory crystals to the communicator. Daniel programmed the targeting coordinates for Centros Station where Rogan worked. He included a desperate message explaining everything as simply as he could. Finally, as the purple void outside began to lighten with what passed for morning in the crucible, they were ready. Activate the relay, Daniel said. Asher threw the switch. Energy surged through the cables. The collectors hummed and began pulling power from the dimensional walls. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the quantum communicator blazed with light. A beam shot upward, tearing through reality like a spear through cloth. Alarms began screaming across the crucible. The dimensional walls themselves shuddered. 5 seconds. The message transmitted. The proof uploaded. Daniel's plea for help screamed across space to a maintenance worker who might not even be listening. Then the relay overloaded. Cables melted. The communicator cracked. And somewhere far above them, the council realized their perfect prison had been compromised. Rogan was cleaning coolant filters on Centro Station when his maintenance terminal exploded with alerts. He dropped his wrench and stared at the screen. Quantum signature detected. Unknown origin. Impossible encryption pattern. Then the file downloaded itself and began playing. He saw Daniel's face, desperate and exhausted. He heard the boy's voice explaining crimes that made Rogan's blood run cold. He watched centuries of evidence flash past. Memory crystals containing proof of genocide and conspiracy, and lies built on bones. "They framed me," Daniel said in the recording. "They murdered my colony. They imprisoned the dragons for discovering the truth. And they're going to kill billions more in a few days. Please, someone has to stop them. Someone has to listen." The file ended. Rogan stood frozen for 10 seconds. Then he copied everything to his personal data chip and ran. On the Crucible, alarms shrieked across every island. The dimensional walls flickered and sparked. Guardian scales roared a warning. "The prison is destabilizing. They are collapsing the dimension." Daniel grabbed Ashir's shoulder. "Can they do that?" "To destroy evidence," Pyrath said grimly. "To erase us completely. We have perhaps hours before the Crucible implodes. All of us will be crushed into nothing." The floating islands began to shake. One of the smaller ones nearby cracked and started falling into the void, dissolving as it dropped. Dragons took flight in panic. Younglings cried for their parents. 3 centuries of imprisonment, and now they would die anyway. "The escape pods," Ashir said suddenly, "in the old fortress ruins. They were never activated because we would not abandon our people. But if everyone is dying regardless, how many pods?" Daniel asked. 7. Each holds 30 dragons maximum. We have 200 here. The math was brutal and simple. Not everyone could escape. Daniel's mind raced, thinking like an engineer. Components, resources, constraints, solutions. What if we combined them? Used their power cores and hull materials to build one ship instead of 7 small ones? Pyrath stared at Daniel. "That is madness. We have no choice," Daniel shouted over the alarms. "Either we try or we die. I need every dragon who knows engineering. I need the warriors to hold back the dimensional collapse as long as possible. And I need everyone to trust me right now." For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Guardian Scales slammed his tail against the stone. "The human speaks truth. We have nothing to lose but the deaths we already face. I will lead the warriors. We will buy you time." He looked at the younger dragons. "Protect the younglings. They have never seen sky beyond prison walls. Let them live to fly free." The next hours were chaos focused by desperation. Daniel directed dragons with engineering knowledge to the old fortress ruins. They found the escape pods, sleek vessels covered in dust and decay but still intact. Dragon technology lasted. "Strip the power cores first," Daniel ordered. "We need 7 working cores to generate enough energy for dimensional breach." Ashir checked their containment fields. "Guardian Scales, I need your warriors to reinforce the islands. Keep them from breaking apart." While they worked, the Crucible died around them. Islands fell into the void every few minutes. The chains connecting them snapped like cables under too much tension. The dimensional storms grew worse, reality tearing at the seams. On Centro Station, Rogan found Liara. She was a junior council member, young and idealistic, one of the few who had voted against Daniel's sentence. Rogan shoved the data chip into her hands. "Watch it," he begged. "All of it." "Then tell me I'm crazy," Liara watched. Her face went pale. Her hands shook. When the file ended, she looked at Rogan with horror in her eyes. "This is real. The boy is in the Crucible right now. They sent a child to die for discovering this." Liara stood up. "I need to broadcast this everywhere. The whole empire needs to see. They will kill you. Then I die for truth. Better than living a lie." She ran to the central communications hub. She locked out the override protocols. She uploaded Daniel's message to every public channel in the empire. Billions of beings across hundreds of worlds saw proof of their government's crimes flash across their screens. The empire exploded into chaos. Riots erupted on a dozen planets. Military units refused orders. Council members fled their offices. And on Centro Station, Quellen watched his perfect control crumble. "Find that maintenance worker," the magistrate ordered. "Find the council member who broadcast this. Execute them. And collapse the Crucible immediately. Total erasure. No evidence remains." Inside the dying dimension, Daniel worked until his hands bled. Dragons welded hull plates together with their fire. They connected power cores in series. They built something that had never existed before, a fusion of dragon technology and human improvisation. Elder Pyrath approached Daniel where he worked, connecting control systems. The old dragon's scales were dim, his breathing labored. "I am too old for this escape," Pyrath said quietly. "My energy is nearly gone. But the younglings must survive. Ashir must survive. She will lead our people in the world beyond these walls. Don't talk like that, Daniel said, even though he could see the truth. Pyrath was dying. The crucible had drained him for centuries, and he had given what remained to power their construction. Listen to me, human child. You bridged the gap between species that hate each other. You saw prisoners and chose to see people. That is a rare gift. Use it well. Pyrath touched his massive head to Daniel's shoulder. Tell them our story. Tell them we were not monsters. We only wanted justice. The old dragon's eyes closed. His breathing stopped. Around the construction site, other elder dragons were collapsing too. They were giving their last energy to the ship, ensuring the younger generation would have enough power to escape. Launch in 5 minutes, a dragon engineer called out. The dimensional walls are failing. If we wait longer, we won't have a destination to escape to. Daniel climbed into the vessel with the others. 200 dragons packed into a ship built for that many, young and old, warriors and scholars. Guardian scales sealed the entrance. Ashir took position at the main controls, her claws dancing over displays that had not been active in 3 centuries. Will this work? She asked Daniel quietly. I have no idea, he admitted, but we built it together. Dragon wisdom and human stubbornness. If anything can punch through a dying dimension, it's that combination. The power cores hummed to life. Energy surrounded the vessel in a protective bubble. Around them, the last islands of the crucible were breaking apart. The void was closing in, consuming everything. Now, Daniel said. Ashir activated the dimensional drive. The ship tore through reality like a bullet through paper. The crucible collapsed behind them. 300 years of prison crushed into nothing. They emerged into real space directly above Centro Station. Alarm screamed. The Council's fleet surrounded them immediately, weapons charging. 100 warships against one jury-rigged vessel. But below on the planet, millions of citizens poured into the streets. They had seen the broadcast. They knew the truth, and they were done being lied to. Daniel stood at the viewport of their impossible ship, looking out at an Empire's fleet. 100 warships surrounded them, weapons glowing with charge. He could see Centro Station below, its city sprawling across the curved surface. On the streets, millions of people moved like rivers of color. Protests, riots, revolution. Ashir stood beside him, her wings folded tight. Behind them, 200 dragons waited in tense silence. They had escaped prison only to face execution. Council fleet, this is Magistrate Quellen. A voice crackled over communications. You harbor criminals and terrorists. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Guardian Scales growled deep in his throat. We should fight. Better to die with honor than surrender to them again. No, Daniel said quietly. Fighting is what they expect. That's how they justified imprisoning you the first time. We do something different. He opened a communication channel. Every ship in the fleet, every screen on Centro Station, every device across the Empire received his broadcast. A 14-year-old human boy's face appeared beside a blue dragon who had never known freedom. My name is Daniel. 3 weeks ago, the Council sentenced me to death for a crime I didn't commit. They framed me to cover up their own murders. The dragons you see with me were imprisoned 300 years ago for the same reason. They discovered the truth about the nullifier. They tried to stop genocide, and the Council buried them alive to keep their secret. On the bridge of the flagship, Quellen's mandibles clicked in rage. Cut that transmission! We can't, sir, a technician reported. It's broadcasting on every frequency. He's hacked into our own communication systems. Below on Centro Station, the crowds grew larger. They held up screens showing Daniel's evidence. They chanted for justice. The Council's security forces stood uncertain, unsure if they should fire on their own citizens. Daniel continued speaking. Right now, the Council is preparing to activate the nullifier again. 30 systems, billions of lives. They'll call it a natural disaster and use the stolen energy to power the Empire for another decade, unless we stop them. A new voice cut into the channel. It was Captain Hendricks of the human diplomatic vessel Aurora. Centro's fleet, this is Captain Hendricks. I have reviewed the evidence broadcast by Daniel. As a representative of Earth, I am placing my vessel between your fleet and that ship. If you fire through us. The Aurora, a small diplomatic ship with minimal weapons, moved between the fleet and the dragon vessel. It was a suicidal gesture. One shot from the fleet would vaporize it, but then another ship moved. Then another. Captains across the fleet were making choices. Junior officers were questioning orders. The careful control Quellen had maintained for centuries was breaking apart. All ships fire immediately, Quellen ordered. Half the fleet powered down their weapons instead. On Centro Station, Liara stood at the council chambers with Rogan and a crowd of citizens. Security forces tried to block the entrance but gave up when 10,000 people pushed forward. They stormed into the building. Quellen abandoned his flagship and fled to the planet's surface to the secret facility where the nullifier controls were hidden. A handful of loyalist guards followed him. They reached the control center, a vast chamber filled with machinery that hummed with stolen life energy. Activate the harvesting sequence, Quellen ordered. All 30 systems. Do it now. The technicians hesitated. One of them, a young insectoid named Chirik, shook his head. Sir, the people know. Everyone knows. If we do this, we're murderers. We are survivors, Quellen screamed. The Empire needs this energy. Billions will die, yes, but trillions will live. That is the math of power. That is the price of civilization. No, a voice said from the entrance. Daniel stood there with Asher at his side. Guardian scales and a dozen dragon warriors spread out behind them. That's the price of tyranny. And we're done paying it. Quellen's guards raised their weapons. The dragons tensed for battle. For a moment, violence hung in the air like smoke. Then Liara appeared with hundreds of citizens. They poured into the chamber, surrounding the guards. Rogan was there. Captain Hendricks was there. People from a dozen different species, all of them demanding justice. The guards slowly lowered their weapons. Quellen backed toward the nullifier controls. You don't understand. The Empire will collapse without this energy. Billions depend on not being murdered, Daniel interrupted. He walked forward slowly, hands open. You could have asked for help. You could have worked with other species to find energy solutions. Instead, you chose murder and lies. You made yourself into the monster you accused the dragons of being. I am trying to save civilization. You're trying to save your power, Asher said. Her voice was calm but hard as stone. We dragons ruled once. We made the same mistakes. We thought our way was the only way. We learned that strength without justice is just another word for cruelty. Daniel reached the control panel. The nullifier countdown showed 15 seconds. He looked at the system, reading the alien interfaces. His mining colony training had taught him to recognize energy flow patterns. He saw the activation sequence, the override protocols, the safety systems that had been disabled. His hands moved across the controls. Quellen lunged forward, but Guardian Scales caught the magistrate in his claws, holding him back. Daniel found the core shutdown command. He hesitated for just a second, thinking about all the lives hanging on this choice. Then he activated it. The nullifier powered down. The humming stopped. The stolen energy that had been building for harvest dissipated harmlessly into space. 30 star systems would wake up tomorrow, never knowing how close they had come to death. Quellen sagged in Guardian Scales' grip. You have doomed us all. No, Daniel said. We saved us all. Now we figure out how to actually work together instead of feeding on each other. The trials took months. The council was dissolved. Quellen and the others responsible for the nullifier were imprisoned in a normal facility, with oversight and transparency. The dragons were given a world of their own to rebuild their civilization. They named it New Pyros after their lost homeworld. Daniel's charges were cleared. The evidence proved his innocence in the mining disaster. The true saboteurs, council agents, were found and prosecuted. His parents traveled to New Pyros for a reunion that involved a lot of crying and holding, and his father telling him he was proud. 3 months after the collapse of the Crucible, Daniel stood on New Pyros watching construction. Humans and dragons worked side by side, building a city that honored both species. Ships arrived daily from across the Empire, bringing materials and volunteers. The galaxy wanted to help, wanted to prove they could do better. Asher landed beside Daniel. She had grown in the months since freedom. Her scales brighter now that she was not being drained by prison walls. She would lead her people into a new era. Do you regret it? She asked. You could have stayed on Earth, had a normal life. Instead, you're here helping us build from nothing. Daniel thought about that. He thought about his father's lesson, about doing the right thing when everything is falling apart. He thought about Elder Parath's final words, about bridging gaps between species. No regrets, he said. This is where I'm supposed to be, building something better than what came before. Together. A group of dragon hatchlings flew overhead, practicing aerial maneuvers. They had been born free, never knowing prison walls. Below them, human children played in gardens that existed because enemies had chosen to become allies. The Empire's future was no longer held by those who hoarded power. It belonged to everyone willing to work for it, to fight for justice instead of dominance, to see people instead of monsters. Daniel watched the sunset over New Pyros. The sky was orange and purple, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with Earth. Ashir sat beside him, comfortable in silence. "What do we build next?" she asked eventually. Daniel smiled. "Everything.